Welcome to episode 20 of the Wisdom from the Akasha podcast. My name is Susie. I am an Akashic Records teacher and practitioner, and today I am going to be talking about witch wounding. Witch wounding is something that comes up in Akashic Records sessions with clients, either one-on-one with me or while they're exploring their own Akashic Records. It's a very common wound that lots of people who are on their spiritual journey at this time hold within their light grid. Now, this wound can be past life, it can be ancestral, it can be multiple past lives, it can be multiple ancestral lines. And what I want to talk about today is how this shows up in the individual's current reality and how to move through this witch wounding. I am sure those of you who are listening to this are well aware of the fact that throughout time there has been persecution of individuals, especially female individuals who had intuitive gifts, who had the ability to clairvoyantly see, who worked as healers or who worked as midwives or medicine men and women. This persecution could have happened to this individual in a previous lifetime. It could be through their ancestral line, but this wound is something that is held by lots of people on the spiritual path. There's also a collective wounding aspect to this. When you choose an incarnational body, when you choose a female or a male body, what you do is you take on the collective wounding of that gender, because the majority of persecution against people through a time in respect of witch wounding has been predominantly female, although of course there were males who were persecuted for this. If you're in a female body in this lifetime, then you are going to find that there's going to be an aspect of this collective wounding there, even if you don't have past life or ancestral experience. Now, lots of people will come to me, they will have extremely strong gifts. They will be very psychic. They will have a really strong connection to the astral realm. They will have what I call healer hands. And healer hands are when I connect into somebody's Akashic Records and I just feel this surge of energy all the way through the arms into the hands. And when somebody has these abilities are not a one lifetime thing. This is not, I've taken a Reiki course and this is what's happened to me, or I've spent 6 months trying to open my third eye and this is what's happened. All of your gifts, abilities, skills, and also your passions are built up over many incarnations. What can happen in this lifetime is people will, for example, do a Reiki class or come and do an Akashic Records class, and what they're doing is they're not learning a new modality, they're reawakening and activating within them the memories, the soul memories of what they have learned before and what they have worked with, the systems and practices that they have been initiated into in previous incarnations. There can, of course, also be ancestral gifts. So when you choose a family line to be born into, there may have been a specific reason in respect of the lineage that you're born into and the gifts and skills that that lineage holds. What I find is that lots of people have these abilities. They will have an indication that they have certain abilities, but there's this huge fear around actually accessing and using their gifts and abilities to be of service. It doesn't mean that every time there's a little bit of fear or a little bit of resistance in respect of stepping into service, sharing your gifts with the world, that it's to do with witch wounding. But witch wounding absolutely has a massive impact on people. And what people often describe it as is the fear around showing up, around being of service, around utilizing or tapping into their intuitive gifts. It feels really big. So it's not just a case of, I don't want to share that information on social media in case somebody says something mean to me. It's not just that, it's a bigger fear. It's an actual fear of persecution that they fear. And ultimately, if that soul has experienced persecution, often to the points of death in a previous incarnation, or they are carrying that wounding for that ancestral lineage, it's not unreasonable for them to have this fear. What often goes along with this witch wounding when we look in people's Akashic records is jealousy and betrayal. Oftentimes, this is because people are choosing to reincarnate in this current time period with those people who are from those previous incarnations who actually were the ones who were pointing the finger or telling the authorities, whoever that may be, that this person was indeed a witch. And a lot of the time when we look into why that happened, there is a reason of a jealousy. So the person may have been very gifted and been very helpful to the community, and the person who has then pointed the finger has been very jealous of that person. So what they have tried to do is they've tried to essentially get them out of the way so that they can take the credit for being the one who has abilities. This is a very common theme that is coming up. It's a karmic situation that lots of people are working through now with individuals in their life. So not only are people dealing with the fear that arises, that fear of persecution, potentially to the point of death, but also that there is jealousy, judgment, betrayal from people who their soul remembers has done that to them before in a previous incarnation. So there's that healing of that karmic wound is happening as well. This doesn't just show up as this huge emotion and energy of fear or these difficult relationships with people. Oftentimes, what I see in the Akashic records of people is they've actually put a limit, or sometimes it will be an implant, into either their astral or their etheric bodies to limit their abilities. Now, this sounds crazy. Why on earth would a soul want to limit their abilities when they come into this dense physical incarnation? But oftentimes that has been something that they have agreed prior to coming into the incarnation, and each individual soul is different in respect of, is that soul ready to let go of those blocks, of those implants, of those restrictions that they've self-imposed, or do they still have a use? That is individual and unique to each person. Some souls, they are ready to let go of these blocks, these limitations, and we can do so when we do Akashic Records clearing or when they do clearing on themselves. Sometimes there's a reason, and we can in the Akashic Records dig into the reason as to why the soul, the higher self, wants to hold on to the block or the limitation. Because if the soul isn't ready to release it in the clearing process, there is always a reason as to why. There's always something still that has to be learnt or overcome before that can be released. Some people, just understanding that this is something that they have experienced in the previous lifetimes, or they've taken on the ancestral wounding, or both, gives them that permission to start dealing with how that is showing up in this lifetime now. So maybe they are not speaking their truth. Maybe they are holding back, telling the world about all the amazing services that they offer. For some people, that knowledge and that information is enough. For other people, they like to use the Akashic records for the clearing aspect of the work to be able to help move that energetic stagnation through. It's essentially getting support from your guides in the Akashic records, your soul, and saying, right, we need to move this through, we need to deal with this so that we can move forward. And we are able to do that in clearing. However, as I have said before, Akashic Records clearing is not a magic wand. It's not a case of we can clear that witch wounding and then all of a sudden you're going to be confident, you're not going to suffer from imposter syndrome, you're going to be able to take aligned action and start showing up for yourself every single day. If you have limited yourself because of this underlying witch wounding, there is always an element of self-work that needs to be done in conjunction with the clearing. The clearing can absolutely help. It can move things through. It can move things into closer proximity essentially to you for transmutation. But there's also an element of personal responsibility in you addressing the programming, the conditioning, the behaviors and patterns that have arisen in this current incarnation based on that witch wounding that exists. If you are someone who thinks you may have this witch wounding, either past life or ancestral, and you really want to start dealing with it and working through it, first piece of advice, as with everything, is try to make sure your nervous system is regulated before you do any work in respect of the higher chakras. You always want to make sure that nervous system is regulated, which in the Akashic terms translates into that your root chakra is balanced. I am going to start sounding like a broken record with you all in respect of how important it is to ensure that the root chakra is balanced and that that nervous system is regulated, but it really is essential in respect of developing anything from a higher chakra perspective. Your root chakra provides your foundations, it provides your connection into earth, and it gives you that support to be able to do other work. Now, of course, fear and the energy of fear is the biggest influencer in respect of the root chakras. You can see how when it comes to dealing with witch wounding specifically, that the first thing to deal with is the fear aspect, because unless you deal with that fear aspect of the witch wounding, you're not going to be able to get that foundation and get those roots stable. And then you're not going to be able to start accessing or utilizing the higher gifts that you have. So addressing the fear is absolutely paramount. Of course, we live in a society at the moment which is extremely fear-based. We have fear narratives and conversations pushed into our energy field all of the time to try and keep us in that vibrational frequency of fear. If you are feeling that you're overwhelmed with the amount of information that there is about what's going on in the world, remember that it's only very recently in human history that we have had access to so much information about what is going on everywhere in the world. If you feel that you need to take a break and you need to really disconnect from outside and external influences to have some time by yourself to be able to start dealing with this, what fears have I got that are coming up? What are actually my fears coming from my internal being in comparison to what fear narratives am I taking on from the external perspective? Then please do give yourself permission to do that. This is not about avoiding what is going on in the real world, but it's about you being able to identify and analyze what is yours and what is coming in from outside of you, so that you can then get yourself into a position of regulation or balanced from a root chakra perspective. Those of you who are in the membership, it would be worthwhile going back to the episode on the root chakra and the energy of fear, and also the PDF document that helps you work with that. If you're in the membership and you're thinking, I definitely have this, I would highly recommend going back and looking at all of that to help you deal with this fear aspect. Perspective of the chakra system, witch wounding can affect a number of different chakras. Predominantly what we'll see is the witch wounding affecting the solar plexus chakra, that personal power center, the throat chakra, so that ability to live and communicate from a place of complete authenticity. And oftentimes there will also be sacral chakra involvement in respect of emotions that have come up but been repressed because of the fears that come with the witch wounding. There can also be an aspect of wounded internal feminine energy if it has to do with the witch wounding from the collective aspect or from past life trauma in female bodies or from the female ancestral line. There can be a number of different chakras and stagnation at play, and obviously working with each of those individual chakras, but remembering that the chakra system is a system can be very beneficial to help you move through this. The comfort zone is the operating program of the ego. Your ego is going to try everything it possibly can to keep you in that comfort zone at all times. Now, this isn't advice of feel the fear and do it anyway, because sometimes the fear that you're experiencing can feel so big and so overwhelming that you just don't take any steps forward. Rather than trying to shift from this dysregulated fear state into I'll just do everything that my soul desires, taking small steps in the right direction can really help. For example, if you have a spiritual business and you really have a message that you want to share, but you're a little bit hesitant at doing so, you're a little bit fearful in doing so, then rather than just going out there and posting 5 times a day or whatever it is that business gurus are telling you to do today, just take it baby step by baby step. If you're more comfortable with written posts, then make a written post. If you're more comfortable with video posts, then make a video post. Whatever works, but it's pushing yourself to the edge of the comfort zone and a little bit over, but not to the extent that it's going to put you into freeze mode, stop mode, or paralysis completely. What happens when you do this is you're essentially proving to yourself, to your soul, that I can share my opinion, I can share my perspectives, I can share my gifts, and I'm not going to die because I do so. This is what you're trying to do when you're taking these actions that are a little bit outside of the comfort zone, but not so much that it stops you from taking any action. I come into contact with people who are really feeling this pull to be of service, and this is a very normal part of their spiritual journey, and they have this complete soul level desire to be of service to help others, but then there's this other side of them that has this fear coming up, and this is how this witch wounding will often show up. And I'm very much a fan in this respect of baby steps rather than just not taking any aligned action whatsoever. Your pull to service should always be your biggest why. That desire to serve, that desire to help others should always be the biggest why. But if you're having fear and resistance coming up in respect of doing so in whichever format and in whichever way you want to do, rather than just ignoring that fear, taking the time to address that and put yourself into the position of a stabilized nervous system will be really beneficial for you to then start to be able to take those aligned action steps. I say aligned action because that aligned action comes from a place of that desire to serve, that taking higher guidance and higher wisdom from your soul, from your guides, and then actually taking the action, then actually making the podcast, creating the social media post, whatever it is you want to do. That's the aligned action. But you can't receive higher guidance and higher wisdom if you're in the frequency of fear, if you're in this energy, because fear from a level of consciousness perspective, for those of you who are familiar with the levels of consciousness chart, if you're not, I'd highly recommend it. Fear is a 100, and anything below 200 in a levels of consciousness perspective is a state of contraction. When you're in fear, you're not in alignment to your soul. Your soul is expansive. Your soul has no fear whatsoever. Dealing with that fear first has to be an absolute first step, and then taking the aligned action is the next step. Another thing just to note here is that oftentimes the fear and the memories and the emotions of this wounding live in the lower 3 chakras. So the root chakra, the sacral chakra, and the solar plexus chakra. Oftentimes it's essential, if this fear is coming up, to undertake body-based practices to be able to, first of all, move that fear through that's there, and also to help move any fear that you have repressed, any emotions that you have repressed throughout this incarnation, allow that to come up and to be transmuted. Body-based practices are essential because a lot of the time when you're working with the lower chakra system, the energetic stagnation is stored in the physical body, and it's not something that you can access through the brain, through thinking about things. Body-based practices are very good when you're trying to work with this energy and transmute it, move it through you. As I said earlier, this can also be an ancestral wound, and those ancestral wounds are often stored in those lower 3 chakras as well. Working with the body and body-based practices can really help you to connect to the level of the ancestral wounding. There's also specific questions that you can ask in your own Akashic records or with a reader like myself in respect of the ancestral wounding that has occurred, the gifts and skills that the ancestral line has had, and also how you can move through those wounds. I'll probably do a separate episode on ancestral healing from the perspective of the Akashic records, but please do know that you can always use your Akashic records to help you dig into these things for yourself in a deeper way. I hope that you have found this episode useful in respect of understanding what witch wounding is. I know I talk about it a lot in my workshops and on my lives, so I just wanted to do an episode that really explains what this is, how this shows up in this lifetime, and how to work with it rather than just trying to ignore it if you feel like it's there. Thank you to everybody who has reached out to tell me that you are enjoying the podcast with podcast episode suggestions. I always appreciate those. I also have some conversations coming up in the podcast with some really interesting friends of mine in the spiritual community about different topics. So they will be coming up over the summer. You won't just have to listen to me. There will also be some conversations with different people who work in different fields. So I'm really excited to be able to have the opportunity to host those conversations with people, and I hope that you're going to enjoy those episodes also. All that is left to be said is have a lovely weekend, stay hydrated if you are somewhere where the sun is shining, and I will see you next week for the next episode.